The first time I was introduced to a colloquium was when I was a student, and the president hosted one in her home. And I didn't know what it was. But if I could take you all back to grade 12 when you studied Latin, remember Latin? You all studied, right? Loqui means to talk, and colloquia is a high-level discussion, and that kind of where the word colloquium came from. It's an opportunity, particularly they use it in academic environments, to have discussions, and sometimes discussions about really important things, sometimes things that make students uncomfortable and make staff, faculty uncomfortable. In my view, there is too many times on university campuses today when we are not creating opportunities for people to talk about really important items and explore it and do it in a civil way. And through those discussions, sometimes you get uncomfortable. And I've said that if you're not uncomfortable at some point during your time on a university campus, that we've failed you. We have not prepared you for the reality of life. And so we see a lot of things being canceled or protesters, and that's not what we want Northwood to be. We want to have rich, deep conversations on both sides. So what are some examples of colloquia that I've done in the past? We've explored the legalization of cannabis. Is that a good thing or bad thing? We brought in medical experts and students and researchers about it. We've talked about really ugly, uncomfortable things like sexual violence on university campuses, and got into that and tried to explore it. In today's society, at this moment, we could probably talk about trans athletes competing in our environment. What do you think about that? And so that's the type of thing that a colloquium is meant to be, particularly on a university campus. And the fact that we have Andy and his working team, including some people here who have put this together. We have our guests here, colleagues and students. Can't thank you enough. Mayor Donker, Maureen, I mean, every time we pick up the phone and ask for you to join us, you say yes. And it's that type of reaction that makes Midland, I think, one of the preeminent small cities to live in America. And Sharon, you'll hear a little bit more about, who in many ways is making this community even richer. But I'll give you an example. We have friends at another university not far from here. It's red, and no, and they have a new president. And what does Sharon do? She says, I'm going to bring the First Lady of Saginaw Valley and the First Lady of Northwood, and we're going to have a lunch, and these two women are going to get to know each other because it's important for them to know what this community is all about, and they'll make a new friend. So this is the type of pedigree that we have here, and I know these individuals, and I'm thankful that you've all made the time to start this conversation tonight. So with that, Andy, I'll hand it over to you. And look, everyone is here, the people who are meant to be here, and we'll do more of these going forward, but I'm really excited to hear some of the thinking that goes on tonight and learn from it and get different perspectives. And hopefully we all walk out of here knowing just a little bit more than we did when we came in. So with that, Andy, thank you for your leadership in putting it together. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So thank you, President MacDonald. To set the tone a little bit, we're going to have a group participation activity. Everybody's like, oh boy, here we go. Tonight we're talking about empathy. And as you all know, empathy is one of the behaviors found in our Code of Ethics. So all together, we're going to go through that Code of Ethics real quick. Fresh air, remember? So F is freedom. R is respect. E, we all know that because I just said it, empathy. S, spirituality, excellent. H, honesty, excellent. A, achievement. I, you didn't say it. Integrity. And the last R is responsibility. Excellent. So empathy is near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I think that we should be talking about a little bit more. We should be listening a little more and talking a little bit less. But empathy, when you think of empathy, you think probably of walking a mile in someone else's shoes, right? But to me, I think it's a little bit deeper than that. We've all gone to a movie with friends or family, and you walk in, you watch it, and you walk home, and you discuss the movie. How many times, even though you've seen the same exact thing happen in that movie, how many times do you all agree that it was a good movie or a bad movie, that every character in there was good or bad, or even had the same favorite character in that movie? Doesn't happen very often. But yet we watch the same exact movie. That's where empathy takes us past our own personal thoughts of what we just saw and forces us to think even deeper about what we're being told, to try to see it through the eyes of the person that's telling it to us. Does that make sense? It's a little bit deeper than that, right? We're just not just watching the movie and absorbing it and coming up with what our favorites, our goods, our bads, based on our experiences, but rather hearing and trying to understand other people's lived experiences. And when we do that, that's when we really get into having empathy for other people. And it allows us to, our other theme for tonight is to build a strong, safe, welcoming community. So think about empathy. It's hard. It really requires a lot of the other behaviors in our code of ethics. It requires respect. There's responsibility with that. But empathy is such an important topic. So, our first presidential colloquium, and clearly probably our best panel ever. So the format is very simple. It's very informal. I'm going to pass the mic to my left, and in turn, all of our panelists will pass the mic to their left. At the end, we'll have time for question and answer, or just thoughts to have more conversation in our group. But before I do that, let me introduce who we have with us tonight. First, we have Sharon Mortensen, and she is the president and CEO of the Midland Area Community Foundation. Would you welcome her, please? Thank you for being here. Next to her, on her left, is our beloved mayor of Midland, Maureen Donker. Please welcome her. Our first student panelist, Jacob Watson, is a junior, and he's from Essexville, which is just down the road east of Bay City. Please welcome him. April Owens is to his left, and April is our Director of Safety and Security here at Northwood University. April. And last, but certainly not least, another junior here at Northwood, Mr. Daniel Wynn, and he is from Novi, Michigan. Right? Okay. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone to my left, and we're going to continue our conversation about empathy and community, starting with Sharon. Thank you, Sharon.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It is really a privilege to be here tonight and to be at the first colloquium. This is very awesome. And the subject that we're talking about, empathy, is one that is really near and dear to my heart. And it fits in, and really it fits in with what we do in community too. So let me start by telling you what our community vision statement is. So we say Midland County, an inclusive community. And I want to talk about how inclusive fits with empathy. Together, forward, bold, an exceptional place where everyone thrives. That is what we aspire for here in Midland. And you're all part of that because Northwood is part of Midland. And we're so excited that you are. When we think about inclusion, we want people to feel accepted. We want them to feel a sense of belonging. We want them to feel welcome to our community. We want them to feel free to be who they are. And when we think about inclusion, you've got to have empathy to get there. Now, it's easy, and I love what President MacDonald said, and that is there should be some discomfort, honestly, with empathy. And the reason there should be discomfort is it's easy to empathize with someone like you. If someone is a mom with kids, I can empathize with that, what they might be going through. If someone is a runner and they pulled a hamstring, I can empathize with that. You know, if someone enjoys making bread, I can empathize with that. I can kind of understand. So the things that are comfortable to me that I know about, it's really easy. Or someone in leadership in an organization and is sharing their struggles, I can empathize with that. But it's harder when someone is unlike me. It's harder in that case to empathize. And to be able to really empathize, it starts with, what do you think? What do you think empathy starts with? Knowledge. What else? Respect. Those are great things. I would say listening is where it starts. So, and I think those other things are important, but listening, you've got to really listen to someone else. And to listen, you can't be thinking about what you're going to say next. Have you ever done that, like maybe with a friend or a colleague, or, I'm married with my spouse. Like they'll be saying something, but I'm just waiting to tell them what I want to tell them. Am I really listening? No, because I'm thinking about what I want to say next. So to really have empathy, you've got to listen. And that means you've got to set aside judgment. You've got to set aside any maybe assumptions or biases you might be aware that you have, and just listen to the person. And it's much harder to listen to someone that is not like us. And that is really a critical piece of empathy, is to listen first, to really listen. Because if we want to be inclusive, we've got to listen to people different than us. I heard someone speak some years ago, and they were talking about the difference, people that have resources, those that don't have financial resources. And so they were really talking about how do we make sure we relate to people that might be from a different socioeconomic class than we are. And they said, if someone came in the room, how would you know that they might not have financial resources? What would be different? And what would be different? Clothes, maybe the way they speak. They might feel uncomfortable if you were professionally dressed. They might be uncomfortable coming up to you, right? There would be some things that would clue you in that they were maybe different than the rest of the group there. Well, when you see, when somebody comes in and there may be things that clue you in that they are different than the rest of the group, how do you open up and listen and get to know them and welcome them and hear what they have to say? Because that's really what empathy is all about. And to practice empathy, it should be hard. Because if it's easy for us, then really we're probably being around people that are more like us, that we can relate to and we can empathize with. We can understand their perspective. We can listen and have some understanding. And I think we're very challenged with this in these very divisive times. These very divisive times that we see in our community, we can be very challenged with, because sometimes we think to listen to a different opinion, to have empathy, means we agree. And it doesn't mean that. An example I can give is when one of my children was younger and they came home from school and said, "I hate my teacher." Now, what the natural parental reaction is to say, you shouldn't say that. But if you instead say, sounds like you're really upset right now. Can you talk to me more about what's going on? And so I can empathize with the fact they're upset. I don't agree with what they said, but I can empathize with the emotion that they're experiencing, right? And I think that's something that we need to practice, is how can we listen? Someone that's doing some great work in our community around this is Erin Patrice Walker. I don't know if any of you have gone to one of her shows. She does something called, she has a nonprofit called Breaking Bread Village. And she brings people around a table that are very different in their perspectives. And then there's an audience there, and she asks them questions, and they talk. And it's very interesting to watch, because people do have to listen to and then indicate some empathy for the other person, even if they do not agree with their perspective at all. So as we think about empathy, I wanted to challenge you to think about empathy beyond what might be comfortable, as to what it means to really listen to someone else. And when we think about inclusion, you've got to have empathy to be able to do that, to really be an inclusive community where people feel accepted, experience a sense of belonging. You've got to have empathy there. So I love that you're starting with empathy, because really I think the listening skills involved in empathy are the groundwork, aren't they, of these other things? And good job, you guys, that could recite all the fresh air. That was great. But that really is the groundwork of that. I know there was one you couldn't remember, but that's okay. But that's the groundwork, is the ability to listen and empathize with someone who is, especially someone who is different from you. So as I think about how do we build community, and how do you build a strong community here at Northwood University, you have a lot of diversity on your campus, don't you? You have a lot of different perspectives. So how do you build empathy? It's by listening and hearing someone else's perspective, and showing that, showing an understanding, even though you may not agree with that. That's really how you build community, is through that. So that's a little bit, I know we're going to get to more, but a little bit on empathy as we start. So now to community. All right.
At the city, we talk about being a city of choice. And what we mean when we say that is we want to be a place where people want to live and businesses want to locate. And you can't do just one thing to make that happen. You have to do lots of different things. And one of the things that I love about this community is that in Midland, you can make things happen. You can be a part of something. You can co-create with your friends, people who become your friends because you work with them and you're focused on things that are really important and going to make Midland that kind of place. So back in 2010, the Knight Foundation came out with a report. It was called The Soul of the Community, Why People Love Where They Live and Why Does It Matter? And the Knight Foundation owns newspapers across the country. So they have newspapers in 26 cities across the US. And over 3 years, they partnered with Gallup, and they surveyed 42,000 people and identifying what is it that makes people attached to the place where they live. So they identified 10 attributes on why people attached, and consistently across those 42,000 people, the top 3 were offering of services, welcoming community, and aesthetics. Now I'm going to talk about all 3 of those because I think they're all 3 important. So offering of services is really, having places where people can gather, where they can meet, and showing that sense of caring. So that's how people really felt about their community, is that they had things where they could go and meet with other people, meet people who are like-minded. That was really, pretty awesome. We work really hard on that here in Midland. And then, welcoming, that's really that sense of belonging. So when you talk about empathy, feeling that this is a place for me. There's other people like me here. And then aesthetics is beauty. So now when I think about Northwood, I just want to say that you guys are really, really doing quite a bit in those 3 areas. So if I look at this campus and I think of the spaces that have been created for students to come together and to meet other students, I think if I look down, what happened after the flooding, and you look at that beautiful new space that you have, that gathering space, how awesome is that? Another place where you can come together. And that whole sense of welcoming, just having gatherings like that where I mean, they're feeding you to get you here. They're doing everything, to help you, meet other people and get to know your community. And then beauty. I just have to talk about that because in Midland, we're in the middle of a floodplain in a valley. We are not Denver, Colorado, or, the Upper Peninsula or Traverse City. We have to create all our own beauty here. And so we work really very hard on that. So if you drive down Eastman Avenue, you'll see flowers planted, and that's really important. It tells people that we really care, that they're important to us. So we try, to do that downtown. We create, again, those spaces where people can come and gather. The fact that, when I was first invited to come down and welcome students, I thought, really, that's kind of interesting. That didn't happen to me when I was in college, let me tell you that. And so, I got to just say, welcome to Midland. And what I love is, what? You are our university and we are your city. And we are really happy that you're here. And when you think about your founders and you go back to that whole, Northwood idea, if you come into the city of Midland, you'll see the sign that says Midland, home of modern explorers. It says, and those guys who founded Northwood, Turner and Stauffer, were modern explorers. And they were doing something that was very different than was being done any other place. And I think those are the kinds of things that are happening in Midland that help set us apart from some other communities that we compete with. Because, communities like colleges and universities do compete for one another. And I can just look at you and honestly say, we want you all to come back here and live and work and help build this community. And we hope that you love it so much here that some of you will think that this is the place you really want to be, because we want you, to be here. So I think that whole Soul of the Community report really got us thinking as a community about, what are we really focusing on and how do we do things a little bit better? And then in 2014, Sharon just told you about the visioning statement that we came up with. And we came together and not only had that vision statement, then it's like, okay, well, this is what we want to be. How do we make that happen? And we identified 9 areas that we said, if we focus on these 9 areas, that we will, be able to achieve that vision. Now, none of us could remember those 9 areas. Let me just tell you that. So we got it down to 4, and Sharon might have to help me with this. So the first one is building our livelihood. Then caring for our people, D, I have to go, B, C, D, E. D, developing our talent, and E, enriching our community. So all of the things that we focus on and try to do here in Midland, focus on those areas. On how do we, be the kind of place really where people want to live. So those are some of the things we're doing. I guess one other thing that I think we're really very excited about, and I do think that this sets us apart from other communities, is the work that we have been doing in positive psychology and really becoming, it's about well-being. And Andy went through the course with many of us. So we, so actually I want to give credit where credit was due. The Rock of Midland really started this work with the University of Pennsylvania. They have a School of Applied Positive Psychology, and they were working with them on helping them create coursework to build grit and resilience. And if you would have, back in 2017, or 15 and 16, we were going through a major change as a community. We were seeing major changes in our business community. And for us, who had been a company town, things were changing really dramatically for us. And how did we really get through this? Because we didn't know what the future was going to look like. And it was really, how do we develop some grit and forward thinkingness? And how do we help ourselves and our community get through that? So we applied at the university's program in applied positive psychology. It's a master's program, and we were chosen as one of the courses, and we asked them to help us develop an approach that would build well-being, helping residents become citizens, enhance community connections, and create a more welcoming place for diverse populations. So we worked with graduate students, and we came back and we said, I'm kind of a slow learner, I just have to tell you that, and that I have to hang out with people who are talking about the same things that I'm talking about and help me understand and call me on it if I'm messing up. and help me be, better in that area. So we thought, what if we train other people across the community in this work? So we were able to raise some money to put 50 people through this whole coursework. And this was really a commitment. So it was leaders of organizations, because we thought it needed to be the leaders. And we met monthly. We had a weekly class, and we had some work that we had to do, all in this whole applied positive psychology curriculum, which was important for us because, one, we're a science town, so everything has to be based in science, and that's what this is. It's not fluff. It's really science-based, which is really important. So it focuses on 5 things. We call it PERMA, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, PER, meaning, and accomplishment, and then the H is health. And so, it's like, how do we help people have more of this in their life? So positive emotions is true, joy and happiness. It's not just happiness, but it's like that feeling of, joy. And you can't just focus only on happiness, because there's more to life than just that. So then engagement is about using your strengths and developing your strengths. So think about it, because I know you've all experienced this. Have you ever, got up in the morning, you were working on a project, it's 8 o'clock, and next thing you know, it's 3 in the afternoon? Okay, that is called flow. And you can get more of that in your life if you are using your strengths and you're figuring out how to use that and doing some things that are a little bit more challenging to you. So we have PE, engagement, our relationships, again, that whole sense of belonging, which is so incredibly important, meaning, being part of something bigger than yourself, and accomplishment. It's like you have to, you have to feel like you're having some accomplishments in your life, and then, of course, health. So we started, training people. We have a whole well-being coalition. Many of our organizations, like the city and the county, both have well-being committees within inside the organization to help people, at work, and how we relate with one another. And we think that this work sets us apart from some other communities and really shows that, our folks are important to us. And so what else am I missing, Sharon, as far as what we're doing as a community?
Say maybe communities of excellence, and Max loves Midland.
Okay, I honest to goodness wrote everything down that I was going to say, and that is in this book. So let me just say, Dr. Stehauer helped us with this. And this was really kind of, once we knew that Kristen was involved with this work, it was like, whoa, this is, I kind of call it, this was like a sign from God that we should be involved in this, because who has an expert in their community who is an evaluator for this? So this is a 3-year process. It's a Baldrige process, and Baldrige typically, no, okay, I might say this all wrong, and you'll have to correct me. So Baldrige typically did help hospitals and education organizations really become excellent in their work, and there was a lot of effort they had to put on into that, and it took an act of Congress to really get that recognition. And they said, this is really good stuff. Why aren't communities doing this work? And so we were the third group that went through. So now we have cities, there's 26 cities across, something around that, across the country that we are partnering with, so we can, tell them what we're doing, they can share what they're doing. So we will have some great ideas to bring back to our community. So we will create a wonderful place to live, because we know that that's something that we can offer to our residents, that maybe, we're not going to be New York or Chicago. That's not who we are. But we can create an awesome quality of life here in Midland, and that really is our goal. So with that, yours.
I've noticed in myself that I'm insensitive, and I have a hard time empathizing with others' losses. Everyone was in shock and grief, crying, except me, for example, when my uncle, mid-50, died in an accident. And I noticed now many times in the past that I'm callous and indifferent to human suffering or feelings. Is it something important to think about and reconcile, or perhaps some people are just born that way?
Empathy is what makes us whole. It brings us closer, and it can change the way you see the world. Most of us aren't the kind of people to show emotion often. What if we did? Who would we become? Would we find ourselves to be different people? When you allow yourself to be vulnerable just for a moment, are you weak or are you stronger? A close friend of mine once said, "A man in control of his emotions is the strongest one." Now, this could mean that you bottle those emotions up and never share them, but that's just not healthy. You'll stress yourself out, cut ties unknowingly to people you care about, or find yourself in a dark place. Learn to express yourself to others who care about you. Your parents, your friends, your partner, or even me. Give yourself a second to reflect. Recognize your value. Share your struggles, and others will listen.
Originally, that video was designed as a personal passion product that I had made alongside the community building that we're required to do as RAs on this campus. So I'm in charge of 38 freshman boys, which can be a lot to handle at a certain time, but it's important to us that we have to build these values amongst these kids so that when they move through and graduate, that they have the proper skills that are necessary for them to succeed in the real world. So when I was making that video, I originally wanted it to be very comedic because it would be the best way to grab the attention of the students. And then I wrote a script and I kept just writing questions and narrating over it. And I'm going, this is really deep. It was like emotional type questions and things. And Dean Cripe really loved it. He thought it was awesome. So alongside my residents, who they were pretty vocal about it because typically they wouldn't have that kind of environment where they could be approached with these questions that bring out something in them, something that makes them draw out emotions that maybe they're not so in touch with. And I wanted them to recognize that you can't bottle things up. You have to spit it out sometimes, and it's healthier for you and your future if you just let it out and help yourself sometimes. So yeah, that was just a 3-minute clip roughly. That opening was with Jordan Peterson talking about empathy, and he's also been pretty inspirational for a lot of people who are looking at increasing their own mental aptitude and working along themselves. So, yes.
So to follow up with Jacob, there was one other part of your video, because I did get to see the video as well, and it's wonderful. Not bottling up, your feelings, your emotions, and talking to people, which also ties back to Sharon, and I couldn't agree more on community and empathy requires listening. It requires open dialogue where you feel comfortable communicating with people and sharing your thoughts and views and being respected. Respect is huge. So just like we've all been taught since we were small children, treat other people like you want to be treated, right? So you approach somebody with respect. Have that communication and open dialogue so that you're getting to understand what other people are about. Taking care of each other, and looking out for each other, and that's what builds a safe community. If we know our neighbors and we know, the ins and outs of where we live, it makes everybody safer because we know who should be there, we know who shouldn't be there. Doors and safety is huge for us because we are all here to take care of each other. It's extremely important to be respectful and listen and have compassion for one another and empathy. And it is something that you have to practice. For some people, it's definitely harder than others. And, we work at things every day to get better. And empathy is huge to make a strong community.
Forgive me, I'm a little bit nervous. But before the event, Mr. Cripe wanted us to meet in his office, and he wanted to get a gist of like what we wanted to touch on and talk about. And I kind of threw like a lot of personal experience stuff that I've experienced on this campus and in life as a whole. And I just wanted to like kind of point out the things that we offer here as a student life, as administrators, and as like a campus as a whole. So a lot of times like in life, me personally, I feel like I didn't necessarily fit in. I felt like I wasn't really supposed to be around. And some of these tools that I've recently picked up, I've only got to pick up those tools because of the resources we have here, resources that I had no idea about. You know, people like come from religious households, and when they come to school, they might not be able to go to church all the time because they're busy with school, they're busy with athletics. So that's why, you know, you have groups like Fellowship of Christian Athletes, you have groups like the Gap. And if you want to talk about mental health problems, or if you want to talk about just like things that you're trying to figure out as a whole, you have a mental health club. If you want to talk about, even if you want to talk to our lovely president, it's like his door is always open. You can always go talk to him. And people don't really know how much of a blessing that is as a whole. And because of these different organizations, because of like groups like the Diversity Inclusion Group, I've learned important lessons along the way into bringing me to where I am now. And honestly, I owe it all to people like you, owe it all to the resources and the groups that we have on this campus, and the fact that we're able to be so inclusive with one another, be so comfortable with one another, the fact that we're able to understand things from from other people's perspective, and the ability to empathize is in a whole is great. And that's just something that we got to just keep digging and working on, because sometimes I think like the world is already kind of a messed up place. Like a lot of things has happened in the world over the years, but empathy can probably change a lot of people's perspectives. Empathy can probably bring more peace, and empathy as a whole can bring more love. So try to be more empathetic, try to be more participative in any resources that you have around you so you can learn more, so you can have those tools to go out in the real world. Because in my opinion, when it comes to college is real life, both barriers, because you're guaranteed three things. You're guaranteed a cafeteria with free food. You're guaranteed housing with a bed, and you're guaranteed classes so you can learn. But the rest outside of that, when it comes to internships, when it comes to meeting important people, when it comes to doing important events, you're always able to be prepared because of the stuff that you have in front of you here. And as a whole, that's a blessing, and thank you.
To begin, we'd like to turn it over to you, and if there's any questions for our panelists, please fire it out, or comments. Let's have them. Anybody? Shay, wait a minute. I got to bring you the microphone so that we can get it on the video.
It's not much of a question, more just like a comment of, I'm a senior, so I've been in Midland since the late 2019, so I saw Midland pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. The differences between the city of Midland and Northwood University as a whole, the culture and the structure of how everything has changed. A lot of focus on mental health, as we have our own on-campus counselor now. A lot of activities are focused on like mental health and stress relief and everything like that. So I think that's definitely a big step forward in at least Northwood. And I see a lot of Midland community line activities and everything, so bringing that back from the pre-COVID days, definitely trying to get people out and about, because I'm seeing a lot of the incoming freshmen just not as active, and just students in general, just they're slowly starting to pick up where we were before. So it's just nice to see that the university and the city as a whole is starting to come back. That's it.
Shay? Integrity. Integrity. Okay.
Hi. When it seems like you either get it or you don't when it comes to empathy. I don't know if that's something you encounter, but what would you say to people who struggle with the concept that I know this person I'm trying to be empathetic towards is not reciprocating at all? Do you have any tips or tricks for that?
Taking a crack. Daniel, excellent.
So, what I've learned is was to think about yourself in like an earlier phase of your life. At one point you wanted to be heard. At one point you wanted somebody to kind of understand you instead of labeling you as misunderstood. And you just remember how you felt after somebody didn't listen to you. And if you have the heart enough for it, you maybe like try to just think about that in the other person's shoes. That's the whole point of empathy. So just remember how it made you feel and just think about how it can make somebody else feel 10 times better to know that they have somebody who truly understands and who can truly listen.
Yeah, and very well said, Daniel. Thank you. And the other thing that I would add when we think about when it's not reciprocal, I think if we practice empathy and if we model that, we're still exposing the other person to that. So I think that that's a great start. And often if people do start to feel heard, then it's easier for them to listen, because sometimes when people feel they're not heard, they don't listen to what anyone else says. So if they can feel heard, that opens the door.
Does empathy always mean acceptance, especially when it's hard?
Who's going to take that one?
I think empathy, in terms of we accept someone for who they are. I mean, we just acknowledge who they are. Doesn't mean I agree with them. I think there's a difference between acceptance and agreement. So I think with empathy, we're hearing somebody's perspective, we're observing their emotions, and they are who they are at that point in time. But again, it doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with, but empathy doesn't have to be agreeing with. It's just listening, understanding, and seeing the emotions of another. I'd be curious if others have thoughts on that.
Empathy is hard. And I think from my own perspective, it's really hard for me, probably with those I'm closest with. Only because I expect them to understand me too, and so sometimes it becomes a little bit of a debate or an argument. But at the end of the day, I think if we are all giving it our best and really trying to listen, I think that's the important behavior. That is it. And sometimes I think if we say to ourselves, what can I learn from this? I start asking myself maybe those questions. What really can I learn? And then it helps me listen in a different way. And, and of course recognizing, which is hard for me, that I'm not always right. Let me just say that.
You asked the question, right? Can you do me a favor? Come up here with me. So I want you to stand right here. I said this in a speech a couple years ago, so I just got to put it back here. So if I were to draw a 6 in the middle of this floor, what would you see? 6? Mm-hmm. Like, if I were to draw like the number 6 just like this, what would you see? But what would I see? 6. So when you talk about empathy, like empathy meaning the same as acceptance, it could mean that, but at the same time, it can still differ because seeing things from people's like perspective and like just coming to stand where they're at and just like, well, just look at what I'm going through right here, or just look at what I see right here. You could be like, oh, I understand. And like you as a person, you may be able to accept me for who I am and from what I come through. And then when I come over here and I look at your perspective and I say, wow, like, and sometimes people really get in like heated debates and arguments about it. I could be like, wow, I really understand and I accept you for who you are and where you're coming from. So as long as like all of us are willing to just look from the other's perspective, I think that's where the acceptance aspect comes.
Hi, thank you so much for all your great points. I just want to say this, usually when we talk about empathy, we always think this is for others' sake. You know, we're being kind to be empathy to others because this is some unfortunate people like we show empathy with, but that's sympathy, that's not empathy. So actually I want to stress this empathy is really for our own sake. You know, I come to America as an international student, and I have to listen, and listen, right, to learn this whole new world because everybody else is different than me. If I want to thrive in this world, I have to listen and learn, right? And that was like information explosion, you know, in my mind. Those few years is more than all I have learned, like in China for 20-something years. So right now, I'm helping international students right now. I like walking my own journey all over again. I keep on reminding them, you know, try to open your eyes and learn. You think this country is crazy, it's cool, you know, like, you know, just, you know, how cool is that to learn that, right? Just today. So in China, we say, in our lifetime, you're only a frog in your own well. So you think this is your world, that's all you know. In your lifespan, you can only, you know, this is your comfort zone. And how cool is that one day if you leap out, you know, to see this is thousands of miles of the world ahead of you. So for empathy, this is for yourself. You know, you defamiliarize with yourself, with your well, and then just try to take a peek for the rest of the world. You know, so it's not just sympathy of others, unfortunate, but to open your own eyes and live in such a much fuller life. And the Midland and America is a good place for this.
Any others? Last one, I think.
So extending on Riley's question, how are you able to achieve empathy while trying to make a decision with differing opinions?
I think the best way for disagreements to totally just evolve is for even just one person to make the first step to recognize that the other person is listening. So you're on the DSP committee with me. Let's say we're planning an event right now, and I'm not really on board with what you're saying. I'm not gonna vocalize that I hate what you want to do, but what I'll do is I'll listen to what you have to say, and then I'll speak my part, so then we both understand where we're coming from, and we find a balance between that. And that's where empathy comes to play, because you need to recognize both sides, and then you can start working amongst yourselves to fix the situation.
One of the things I know, the mayor talked about positive psychology, and one of the traits that is a great character strength trait is curiosity. And I think if we enter situations curious, and are curious about really what you were talking about here, Jacob, like, why do you think that way? Explain your idea. Do you mind if I share my perspective on this? And I think if we're curious, then it allows us to look at all of that, and then that helps you make a better decision for yourself or for the group as a whole. But I think curiosity is such an important ingredient, because that's going to drive you to empathy, because you're curious and you want to know more, and so it helps bring you to a place where decisions are always hard, but it gives you a broader perspective to be able to make those decisions.
One more.
So we talked about empathy here today, but all those other core values, I believe it's important to know those. And to be honest, I had a hard time repeating those. And we do talk about it in the classroom with the the FDN classes. But if we truly want to live it, shouldn't it be like not taught, but it should be all over like the walls and stuff too, I feel like, just so you want people. I think it's important that people know this. And I had a hard time saying it, so I feel like maybe we should put more of the fresh air plaster everywhere on the walls or something like that, if that's possible.
And we're going to put that on the wall because we want people to know what we're about. And I think if you put that up there, people are going to know what you're about. And if someone asks you the question, you're going to be able to look up there and say, look at yeah, it'll help you. It'll remind you every day of what's important.
No, very, very well said. And I do think it's important to say these things. It's interesting at our team meets every Monday at the Community Foundation, and most Mondays we do a stand-up meeting, which lasts maybe a half hour or less, and then once a month longer. But we always start by saying our purpose statement. And so when we start, we say we exist to cultivate the power of giving within our community, support long-term transformation, and help ensure all residents thrive. And we say it every Monday. And now it just, we all know it, and then we talk about things in light of that. So I think you're right. How can you keep it in front of you? How can you say it? There's something about verbalizing, our values, saying it out loud that makes a difference. So yeah, so maybe every class starts with fresh air, freedom, respect, empathy. Yeah, and right where you see it. Yeah, like the mayor was talking about.
I'll just three quick things. I love the conversation around having different opinions, because that's the essence of having a colloquium. That if we talk about difficult topics and you hear a perspective that's different than your own, and at the end of that conversation you haven't changed your opinion at all, you've actually learned more. That you've entrenched your thinking around, this is why I believe what I believe. And that's another aspect of learning. And but honoring the fact that the reality is we have different people with different opinions, and I think honoring that's really important. Jacob, the first time I saw that video about a month ago, I thought it was spectacular, and to see it again, the fact that our students get to see that is a wonderful gift, so thank you. April, you run our security team here, and in my view of meeting your team is they are more about public relations experts than anything, that they try to have conversations and about building relationships. Daniel, the first time we met was at a football practice, and I said a few words, and after that you led the team in prayer, right? Remember that? And so I've got to know Daniel, I think, relatively well. In fact, the last time we saw each other, I gave him a hug and I said, "I love you." And I thought, oh my God, I can't say that to a student. But my wife and I are huggers, and I think it's I love our students here. They are spectacular, and they have character, and so it's great to have both of you here and all of you here today. But I have a question that maybe Sharon and our mayor might be able to answer. If we remember coming out of COVID, this is more of what is your perspective on how special this city is? And we were walking out of COVID, we were wondering, were we going to open again? And we were really committed to opening to our students. And in fact, we probably would have stayed open had the governor sent everybody home. But that was a really difficult time. We were all scared and not knowing what was happening. But we committed to opening. And I saw many of my colleagues, other presidents across the country and in Canada, not only trying to figure it out, but try to understand how are we going to do this with the resistance of the town or city that we're in. Many towns or cities did not want students coming back. They were bringing COVID back into the community, and yet we come here, and not only was our community welcoming, and we had a good relationship with health in mid-Michigan, but we even had a city where residents were putting signs up in August of 2020 saying, "Welcome back to Midland, Northwood University." That was not a normal experience for many colleges and universities, and yet our community, even though it was difficult, made our students welcome. You were back home, you were at Midlands University again. Can you just talk any sense of what was going on behind the scenes there? Why did that happen here and not at most of the other 4,500 colleges and universities across the country? Any sense of that?
I think part of that has to do with we were in crisis also. If you think about the flooding, I mean, we were out there taking care of one another. And, you know, I mean, we were all working in the LEC and then getting in the car, driving and getting the COVID test to make sure we didn't have something. I think for us, that was a very unique time in our history, and we were there. We had to be there for everyone. We needed to be there, and you know, despite, you know, the COVID concerns. And so I think everyone did their best around that. But I think that was really very important, and I think that I think that is part of the beauty of this community. I would like to say I knew what the secret sauce was, but I will tell you that it is this intentional caring about folks and the desire to do your best and be your best. And I think that is kind of comes through our history. You know, people came here, they created, they built, they gave back. And I think that is part of who we are and who we want to be.
Not sure I have a lot to add to that. It was, you know, as the mayor said, just a unique time in our history. I mean, we had just shut down from COVID for how many weeks? Like 6, 7, 8 weeks. And then we were hit with, you know, devastating flooding and dam failures. And we had to care for our neighbors. And we couldn't hide in our houses, right? Because at the end of the day, we had people to care for that had no homes, that had no place to go. I mean, how many residents did we evacuate? 10,000 residents? I mean, it was an incredibly difficult time. But I do think just our love for neighbor, I really do think there's a love for neighbor, like you talked about loving the Northwood students. I think that at the bottom of our hearts, we really love our neighbors in this community. And I think that we had to get out and care for each other. So maybe that helped us in some ways get past some of the COVID hurdles because we just had to. We just had to. And then you set aside, because when you really love someone, fear has to go away. And really, because there's not room for fear when you have to actively love somebody. And so it had to go away. We couldn't be afraid of that. We had to instead lean into the people that were here that we cared about. So yeah, it was a really unique time. But
That's all right.
You know how they always say, don't go to your grave with any regrets. But when I go to my bed with some regrets, it's hard to fall asleep. So I had a question for the mayor, and I was just waiting on a moment to kind of ask it. I wanted to let people get their questions about empathy about the way, because I remember when you first started talking, you were saying the Northwood students should stick around and stay in the city of Midland. And I've never been in the city of Midland. I always grew up in Detroit, and I never even heard of Northwood until it was time to go to college. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So so you knew that already when Coach Matt came on. Yeah, I like that. See, that's what I'm saying. So this gets to my point. This is what I'm saying. Like, after being in Miller for 4 years and living up here, it is a nice city. I really do like it, and it was great for me. But I will say it was hard being up here, being from Detroit, because I don't really see anyone who looks like me up here. In order to really see that, I kind of got to go to Saginaw to get my hair cut, stuff like that. I go to Bay City to kind of more mingle and go to gatherings where I see more people a little bit like me. So I was more asking, if with you being the mayor and like how you were talking about a vision statement earlier, I was more asking, is there a plan for the city of Midland to kind of more add more diversity and inclusion to kind of get the more African-American community to kind of look more at Midland and say, like, you can come up here. And I know it's definitely something that isn't really too prevalent in our mind, being, especially if we're kind of more started in Detroit, but I definitely think if we kind of more get the message out there to know where Midland is about and what's going up here, I think we would make that move. So I just want to know what you got.
Well, I think you can help us with this. So I think, first of all, I said we want you all to stay here and come and co-create with us. And we mean that sincerely. I know that Dow, Dow has this thing, it was called the Diamond Symposium or something, and they brought in minority students. And that is it, and that they were looking at as new hires, or they were looking at Dow as a possible employer. So I wish I knew really what we could do better. So maybe, folks can help us with that. Because diversity is really important. It just enhances your thinking, your creativity, your ideas. And, we were, we were just where we are, we're not a big city, and so it just doesn't naturally have that diversity, but it is our goal. It is one of our, it's very important to us. We focus on that and how we can do that better. So I mean it from the bottom of my heart that we're looking, to do things better, and we're really hoping that people will come here and say, I think I can make a difference here, because you can. You can. So.
Should I say what? It was great. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your questions and comments. Yeah, I certainly. I'm glad we busted right through my previous comment about this being the last question. So thank you all for all of that. So Sharon, Maureen, Jacob, April, Daniel, what a night. Thank you so much for sharing your souls with us. Clearly, there's a lot of passion up here in front of you tonight, and there's a lot of inspiration. And I hope you've learned some things about empathy, and we can go out there and be better listeners and be compassionate. And as you finished with, make a difference. That's another thing that's very important here at Northwood. So we'll work on the code of ethics. I love your idea. Have it everywhere. I think it's great. But thank you all for being here. And President MacDonald, thank you for bringing this series to Northwood. I think this is great. Yeah, I think we all did. We all had to look up what colloquium was. What's plural for colloquium? Is it colloquia? Okay, so no. This is our first. So keep your eyes open. We're thinking once a semester, but we'll see what that cadence looks like. Again, thank you all for being here and your participation. Thank you to our wonderful panel. Like I said, this is going to be hard to top. So thank you for being here.